Content warning asterisk: the following story contains themes of unexplained disappearances, psychological distress, and unsettling events that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. It was May 14, 2023, when the search and rescue team, after weeks of relentless searching, finally stumbled upon it. Not the 4 missing individuals they were desperately seeking, but their camp. Deep within the vast, ancient expanse of the Whispering Pines wilderness, an area notorious for its dense fog and disorienting terrain, they found the remnants of what had once been a vibrant base camp. Tents were still pitched, though flattened by the elements. A campfire pit, long extinguished, sat cold and empty. Food supplies, untouched, lay scattered. It was as if the occupants had simply vanished. The 4 individuals were Sarah Jenkins, a budding documentary filmmaker; Michael Chun, her audio engineer and tech specialist; Emily Davis, the group's seasoned navigator and wilderness expert; and David Miller, the enthusiastic videographer. They had embarked on what they called the Echoes Expedition, a journey into the heart of the Whispering Pines to document its unique acoustic properties and investigate local legends of an abandoned research station from the 1970s. Their YouTube channel, Lost Horizons, had a small but dedicated following, eager for their next adventure. But this adventure had ended not with a triumphant upload, but with a chilling silence. The discovery of the camp brought a wave of both relief and dread. Relief because it meant they were closer to answers. Dread because the scene offered no clear explanation. No signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints leading away into the undergrowth. It was pristine yet utterly abandoned. The only thing missing besides the 4 explorers themselves was their primary video camera and their most advanced satellite communication device. Everything else, from sleeping bags to cooking gear, remained. Then one of the search team members, a grizzled veteran named Officer Thomas O'Connell, noticed something peculiar. Tucked deep inside a discarded, mud-caked backpack, almost as if deliberately hidden, was a small, rugged audio recorder. It was a specialized device, designed for extreme environments, waterproof and impact-resistant. Michael Chun, the audio expert, would have carried something like this. O'Connell carefully retrieved it. The indicator light was off, but the battery seemed to have some charge. Back at the temporary command center, a makeshift tent buzzing with radio static and dim lanterns, the recorder was handed over to a forensics technician. The air was thick with anticipation. Could this be it? The key to understanding what happened to Sarah, Michael, Emily, and David? The technician, a meticulous woman named Dr. Lena Petrova, connected the device to a laptop. The silence in the tent was absolute, broken only by the soft whir of the computer fan. There were multiple audio files. Most were what they expected. Ambient forest sounds, casual conversations, the mundane chatter of a group on an expedition. But then, as Dr. Petrova scrolled through, she found a series of files dated from their last known day, marked simply Logender Final. The first few were fairly normal, capturing the group's progress, their excitement, their observations about the strange quietness of the forest. Michael's voice, clear and focused, often narrated the technical aspects of their recordings. Sarah's enthusiastic tones discussed potential shots for their documentary. But the final file, the very last one, it was short, terribly short, and it was unlike anything else on the device. Dr. Petrova clicked play. Initially, there was nothing but static, a low hiss that suggested a strong electromagnetic interference. Then a faint, disembodied whisper, just barely audible beneath the static, seemed to cut through the noise. It wasn't a human voice speaking words. It was more like a sigh or a distant, drawn-out exhalation. It was unsettling in its ambiguity. The team leaned closer, straining to hear. Was it wind? An animal? Then came Michael Chen's voice, distorted, panicked, and barely recognizable. He wasn't speaking to the others. He was speaking to himself, or perhaps to the recorder itself, as if it was his last confidant. His words were fragmented, laced with a terror that clawed at the listener's ears. It's not right, the frequencies, they're shifting like a pulse. From the ground, a sharp guttural sound, not human, not animal, ripped through the recording, momentarily drowning out Michael's increasingly desperate whispers. It was a sound that seemed to defy natural classification, echoing with an unnatural resonance. It sent a shiver down every spine in the tent. Then another voice, fainter, more distant, but unmistakably Sarah Jenkins. Her tone was not of fear, but of an almost horrified wonder. It's calling to us. Michael, can you hear it? It's not just sound, it's something else." The recording abruptly cut off. Just like that. An immediate jarring silence. The search team members exchanged horrified glances. Officer O'Connell ran a hand over his face. Dr. Petrova, usually stoic, looked profoundly shaken. That final audio clip, so brief, so utterly devoid of context, was more terrifying than any scream or struggle. It painted a picture of something unseen, something insidious, something that had reached out from the depths of the whispering pines and simply absorbed them. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a lost hike. This was something else entirely. And that single fragmented audio file was the only witness, the only voice left to tell the story of what happened to the Echo's expedition. But what exactly was it telling them? And what in the world was calling to Sarah Jenkins in the dark heart of that ancient forest? The questions hung heavy in the air, cold and menacing, promising a truth far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The questions hung heavy in the air, cold and menacing, promising a truth far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. David, a seasoned audio forensics expert with a temperament as steady as a seismograph, felt a tremor of genuine unease ripple through him as he replayed the fragment. He'd spent decades dissecting whispers from shadows, screams from static, but this was different. The sound wasn't just unidentifiable. It felt wrong. It was a low, resonant thrum, almost infrasonic, vibrating through the very bones of the recording. Interspersed were sharp, almost percussive clicks, irregular and precise, like an otherworldly language being hammered out on an invisible drum. But the most unsettling element was the silence that punctuated it. Not an absence of sound, but a heavy, pregnant void that seemed to swallow all ambient noise, leaving only the chilling thrum and those alien clicks. He isolated the frequencies, ran filters, cross-referenced databases of natural phenomena, animal calls, even geological shifts. Nothing. It defied categorization. It was a sound without an origin, a signature without a source. The only thing he could confirm was its incredible power. It wasn't just picked up by the recorder. It seemed to permeate the environment, an unseen force pressing in from all sides. And then there was the faint, almost imperceptible human element. Beyond the thrum and the clicks, buried deep under layers of distortion, he thought he detected a whisper. Not words, not even distinct syllables, but a breathy, desperate exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of immense fear. It was too faint, too broken to be definite, but it gnawed at him. Who was whispering? And why were they whispering in the presence of such an overwhelming alien sound? As David wrestled with the enigma of the audio, miles away, Sarah Jenkins was wrestling with something far more personal. Her calling, as she'd come to think of it, wasn't a voice in her head, nor was it a hallucination. It was a physical sensation, a deep, persistent hum that resonated in her chest, a pull in her gut that felt like an invisible tether dragging her deeper into the ancient, whispering woods surrounding her cabin. She tried to ignore it at first, attributing it to stress, to the isolation, to anything but the unsettling truth. But it had grown stronger, more insistent, a silent siren song that promised answers or perhaps demanded a sacrifice. The forest, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a living entity, its gnarled branches reaching, its shadows deepening, its silence amplified, waiting. She found herself drawn to a specific area, deeper than she'd ever dared venture. The trees there were older, thicker, their bark a mosaic of time and weather. The air grew colder, even on a warm afternoon, and the sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy, leaving the forest floor in perpetual twilight. It was here that the calling intensified, becoming almost painful, a pressure behind her eyes, a ringing in her ears that mimicked the low thrum David was struggling to identify. She felt a profound sense of disorientation, as if the cardinal directions had dissolved, leaving her adrift in a timeless, primeval space. Her logical mind screamed at her to turn back, to run, but another part, a primal, instinctual part, compelled her forward step by agonizing step. She wasn't seeking anything, she was being drawn. One afternoon, the pull became unbearable. It led her to a clearing, a perfectly circular patch of ground where no vegetation grew. The soil was barren, almost bleached, and the air here was thick with an unnatural stillness. In the center, half buried in the dry earth, was a single peculiar object. It was small, no bigger than her palm, made of a dark metallic substance she didn't recognize. It wasn't iron or steel or any alloy she'd ever seen. It was cool to the touch, impossibly smooth, and imbued with a strange, almost imperceptible vibration. It pulsed faintly, a subtle warmth radiating from its core, mirroring the hum she felt within herself. As she knelt reaching for it, a chilling thought pierced her fear. This wasn't just an object, it felt like a key. Back in his lab, David had finally managed to clean up the faint whisper he'd heard. It wasn't a whisper at all. It was a single repeated word, distorted, broken, but undeniably human. The word was Vesper. He typed it into his search engine, expecting a deluge of irrelevant results. Star names, Latin phrases, perhaps a character from a forgotten novel. Instead, the first result sent a jolt of ice through his veins. Vesper Holdings, abandoned research site, Blackwood Forest, Maine. Blackwood Forest. That was the exact location Sarah Jenkins had specified when she'd sent him the audio recorder. The coordinates matched the general vicinity of her isolated cabin. Vesper Holdings, an old, defunct corporation, shrouded in secrecy, rumored to have conducted unconventional research in remote areas. The website was a relic, barely functional, but one line of text stood out, stark and unsettling: Project Chimera, advancing the boundaries of human perception through environmental resonance. Environmental resonance. The low thrum, the clicks, the silence that swallowed sound. It all clicked into place terrifyingly. They weren't just dealing with a strange anomaly. They were dealing with a deliberate, man-made attempt to manipulate something ancient, something primal, perhaps something unseen. David tried to call Sarah. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. A cold dread seeped into his bones. If Vesper was connected to her location, and if that strange audio was a result of their environmental resonance, then Sarah wasn't just a witness, she was at the epicenter. He knew he had to get to Blackwood Forest, to her. But what would he find? A ghost town? A forgotten lab? Or something far worse, something that had been awakened by Vesper Holdings, something that was now reaching out, not just to Sarah but through that chilling audio perhaps to him? He packed a small bag, grabbed his most sensitive recording equipment, and headed for the door, the word Vesper echoing in his mind like a death knell. He had no idea the true extent of what awaited him, or that the key Sarah had just unearthed in the barren clearing was about to unlock a horror that transcended human understanding, linking her calling to a secret buried for decades, and to the very source of the terrifying, alien sounds on his recording. The object Sarah held was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a perfectly smooth, obsidian-dark cylinder, about the length of her forearm and perhaps 4 inches in diameter. Its surface seemed to absorb all light, yet as her fingers traced its cool, seamless form, an intricate network of geometric patterns, almost imperceptible, began to glow with a faint, pulsing azure light from within. The light intensified, reflecting off the barren ground, casting strange, shifting shadows around her. A low hum vibrated through her fingertips, resonating deep in her bones. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was as if the object itself was reaching out, directly into her consciousness. The air around her grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. Then it began. Not a sound from the object itself, but a sound that bloomed inside her mind, clear and resonant, distinct from her surroundings. It was the calling, magnified 1,000-fold. A symphony of impossible frequencies, a chilling harmonic wail that seemed to twist the very fabric of reality. It was alien, yet terrifyingly familiar, like a forgotten nightmare suddenly made real. With the sound came images, vivid and intrusive, flashing across her inner vision like a rapid-fire slideshow. A desolate, snow-covered mountain peak, shrouded in an unnatural, swirling mist. A makeshift camp, tents straining against an unseen force, their fabric flapping violently as if in a hurricane. Yet the surrounding trees remained eerily still. Figures huddled together, their faces etched with a primal terror that made her stomach clench. One face, a woman with kind, intelligent eyes, stared directly at her, her lips moving in a silent scream. A specific date seared itself into Sarah's mind. October 17, 1973. And then a word whispered not in her ears but directly into her soul. Chimera. The vision faded as abruptly as it began, leaving Sarah gasping for breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. The azure glow on the cylinder dimmed, then vanished completely, leaving the object inert and dark once more. She stumbled back, dropping it onto the cold earth, her hands trembling. What was that? The calling had never been so potent, so terrifyingly explicit. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a memory, a warning, an undeniable link to something monstrous. Picking up the cylinder again, this time with a mixture of fear and fierce determination, Sarah knew she couldn't ignore this. The calling wasn't a delusion. It was a conduit. She had to understand what she had just experienced, what chimera meant, and who the woman in her vision was. The desert wind, usually a comforting whisper, now seemed to carry a new ominous note. She had to get back to civilization, back to a place where she could search for answers. Back in her small rented cabin, the internet became her desperate lifeline. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing the fragmented clues that had been seared into her mind. October 17, 1973. Project Chimera. Mountain disappearance. The initial results were sparse, buried deep in archived news articles and obscure government databases. But then a breakthrough. A declassified, heavily redacted government report, labeled Incident Report 73 Alpha, appeared on a forgotten academic forum. It detailed a tragic mountaineering accident in a remote, unnamed section of the Rocky Mountains. The report spoke of a specialized research team, led by Dr. Eleanor Vance, a brilliant but controversial astrophysicist, who had vanished without a trace in the autumn of 1973. Her team included Dr. Samuel Hayes, a renowned geologist, Dr. Rebecca Chun, an expert in bioacoustics, Dr. Michael O'Malley, a theoretical physicist, and a seasoned local guide, Mr. Frank Miller. Their mission, vaguely described as atmospheric and geophysical anomaly research, had been officially terminated due to an unforeseen natural disaster. The official cause of their disappearance was listed as a massive avalanche, yet the report included a puzzling addendum: no definitive evidence of significant snowpack displacement or seismic activity was ever found at the reported coordinates. Sarah's blood ran cold. The woman in her vision, the date, the mountain setting, it all clicked into place. This was the secret, buried for decades. The report mentioned their camp had been found, tents inexplicably intact, but equipment scattered as if abandoned in a desperate rush. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just an eerie emptiness. The official conclusion felt like a flimsy veil over a much darker truth. The government had swept it under the rug, just like so many other inexplicable events. As she delved deeper, Sarah found an archived newspaper clipping from a small regional paper, dated November 1973. It was a human interest piece, recounting the unfortunate loss of the Vance expedition. But one line, buried in the middle, snagged her attention. Local amateur radio enthusiast, Mr. Thomas Jenkins, reported strange atmospheric disturbances and unidentifiable, high-frequency signals emanating from the area around the time of the incident, claims dismissed by authorities as static interference. An amateur radio enthusiast. Strange signals. The alien sounds. Sarah felt a jolt of electricity. Could this Mr. Jenkins be connected? Or perhaps someone who inherited his obsession? She searched for Thomas Jenkins' 1973 audio anomalies and variations, but found nothing current. Jenkins was long gone, his claims forgotten. But then, a different search query, combining 1973 mountain disappearance with unexplained audio frequencies, led her to an obscure online forum dedicated to unsolved mysteries and paranormal phenomena. A username, Audio Anomaly, stood out. This user had posted extensively about the 1973 Vance expedition, theorizing that the official explanation was a cover-up. What truly grabbed Sarah's attention was a specific post, dated just a few months prior. Audio Anomaly claimed to have acquired, through undisclosed means, fragments of what he believed were original radio transmissions and atmospheric recordings from the Rocky Mountain region, dating back to the early 1970s. He asserted that these recordings contained highly unusual, non-natural sonic patterns, frequencies that defy known physics, he wrote, capable of inducing extreme psychological distress and disorientation. He even included a low-fidelity, heavily compressed audio snippet embedded in his post. Sarah clicked the play button, her heart pounding. The sound that emanated from her laptop speakers was faint, distorted, crackling with static. But even through the digital degradation, she recognized it. It was the sound, the alien harmonic wail that had flooded her mind in the clearing, the same impossible frequencies that had been her calling for months. It was the sound that had been on the recording the man in her vision possessed. The connection was undeniable, terrifyingly clear. The man with the recording, the one haunted by the sounds, he was Audio Anomaly. He had been searching for answers to the same mystery that now consumed her. He possessed the audio evidence, the raw, unfiltered terror that she had only experienced as a psychic echo. And she, Sarah, now held the physical key, the obsidian cylinder, the very source, or perhaps the trigger, of those horrifying frequencies, unearthed from the barren ground. A shiver, colder than any desert night, ran down her spine. The government had covered this up. A team of brilliant scientists had vanished. And now she and this unknown man, Audio Anomaly, were unwittingly piecing together a decades-old horror. The calling wasn't just leading her to answers. It was pulling her into the very heart of the danger. The obsidian cylinder pulsed faintly in her hand, as if aware of the revelation. She had to find Audio Anomaly. She had to, before whatever had silenced Dr. Vance's team came for them both. Where's? It was pulling her into the very heart of the danger. The obsidian cylinder pulsed faintly in her hand, as if aware of the revelation. She had to find Audio Anomaly. She had to, before whatever had silenced Dr. Vance's team came for them both. Jessica's fingers flew across her keyboard, a blur of motion born of desperation and years of honed skill. Her apartment, usually a haven of organized chaos, now felt like a pressure cooker. The faint, rhythmic thrum of the obsidian cylinder in her left hand was a constant, unsettling counterpoint to the rapid-fire clicks of her mechanical keys. She was a digital ghost hunter, and Audio Anomaly was the most elusive specter she'd ever pursued. Every tool in her arsenal was deployed: IP tracers, deep web crawlers, encrypted forum sniffers. She threw them all at the digital ether, searching for any trace, any fingerprint Audio Anomaly might have left behind. Hours melted into a relentless, caffeine-fueled vigil. Her screens glowed with lines of code, network maps, and fragmented data packets. The silence of the night outside her window was absolute, a stark contrast to the buzzing intensity within her small workspace. Audio Anomaly was good. Too good. Their digital footprint was practically non-existent, a testament to exceptional operational security, or an almost paranoid need for anonymity. Every lead she chased dissolved into an elaborate series of proxies and anonymizing networks. It was like trying to catch smoke with a net. Frustration gnawed at her, a bitter taste in her mouth. This wasn't just some casual researcher. This was someone who understood deep web forensics as well as, if not better than, she did. This was someone who knew they were being hunted or had been at some point. Just as despair threatened to set in a flicker, deep within a heavily encrypted darknet forum, buried beneath layers of obsolete data and decoy threads, she caught a glimpse of something. Not an IP address, not a direct contact, but a unique, almost signature-like encryption key. It was a digital breadcrumb, specifically designed to be overlooked by all but the most persistent or perhaps the most intended. The obsidian cylinder in her hand gave a sudden, almost imperceptible surge, a warmer pulse against her palm. A confirmation. She was on the right track. She spent another hour decrypting the key, her brow furrowed in concentration. The process was agonizingly slow, each layer peeling back to reveal another, more complex cipher. It was a digital labyrinth, clearly designed to deter the casual inquirer. Finally, the last layer gave way, revealing a URL. It led to a private, invitation-only forum, not for criminal activity, but for something far stranger. A collective of independent researchers, whistleblowers, and fringe scientists dedicated to documenting and deciphering unexplained phenomena. Accessing the forum was another challenge. It demanded a specific, obscure passphrase, one that she eventually pieced together from fragmented metadata linked to the encryption key. The passphrase itself was eerie. The echoes of silence remain. Once inside, the forum was a sparse landscape of cryptic threads and pseudonym-laden posts. She navigated through it, searching for Audio Anomaly. The username itself was a nod to their focus, she realized. And there it was, a thread titled Frequency Shift, Vance's final log. The date stamp was just days before Dr. Vance's team had vanished. She clicked, her heart hammering against her ribs. The thread was a series of posts from Audio Anomaly, growing increasingly frantic. Audio Anomaly the signal. It's changing. Not just frequency, but its nature. Feels predatory. Like it's listening back. Timestamp. 2 days before Vance's disappearance. Audio anomaly Vance is getting too close. He's found something in the missing audio, something that wasn't just erased, but actively suppressed. He thinks the cylinder is a receiver. He's wrong. It's a beacon. Timestamp: 1 day before Vance's disappearance. Jessica's breath hitched. A beacon, not a receiver. It attracts. Her own revelation, echoed by audio anomaly. The cylinder in her hand pulsed again, stronger this time, a low hum resonating through her bones. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was a literal physical attraction. She scrolled further, the air in her apartment growing heavy, charged with an unspoken dread. Audio anomaly they found him. They found Vance. Not just his research, but him. The silence, it's absolute. No trace. No signal. No echo. They don't just erase Jessica. They consume. Timestamp: the day Vance's team vanished. The mention of her name sent a chill down her spine. How did they know her? A cold sweat broke out on Jessica's forehead. They knew her. Audio anomaly knew her. Or perhaps they were leaving a message specifically for her, anticipating she would be the one to find it. The next post was the last. It was heavily encrypted, even within the secure forum, and marked urgent for eyes only JM. Jessica Miller. Her full initials. The decryption took precious minutes, each second feeling like an eternity. As the final characters resolved on her screen, a subtle, almost imperceptible hum started in the room. It wasn't from her equipment. It was a low, resonant frequency, just at the edge of human hearing, but her sensitive audio monitors, always active, spiked faintly. It was coming from outside. The message from audio anomaly filled her screen. Audio anomaly Jessica, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, or I'm about to be. They are here. The cylinder is not just a beacon. It's a lure. Brings them. Vance believed the missing audio was a recording of the phenomenon. He was wrong. The missing audio is the sound of their arrival. They don't want us to hear it. They want us to be silent. The cylinder amplifies the attraction. It's why his team vanished without a trace. No distress signals, no final words. The silence was imposed. The hum in her apartment intensified, a pressure building behind her eardrums. Her screen flickered, briefly distorted, as if a localized electromagnetic pulse had swept through. Audio anomaly they followed the signal, the one amplified by the cylinder. They are drawn to anyone who understands it, anyone who can manipulate it. I have been tracking their movements, their silencing patterns. They operate in remote, desolate areas, places where the natural acoustic environment is already vast and empty. They thrive in the deepest silence. I found a convergence point, a place where the missing audio is strongest, where the signal originates. It's where they take those they silence. It's a trap, yes, but it's also the only way to understand. The coordinates are hidden in the spectrum. Not a GPS coordinate, Jessica. A spectral coordinate. A frequency, a harmonic, and a phase shift. Only someone like you, with Vance's original analytical tools, could possibly decipher it. Use the cylinder. It will guide you to the exact harmonic. It's the key to their door. But be warned. Once you hear the missing audio, you'll be on their radar. And they silence everyone who listens. The hum was now unmistakable, a low guttural vibration that seemed to emanate from the very walls of her apartment. Her monitors flickered again, displaying a brief, chaotic burst of static across all audio channels. The obsidian cylinder in her hand was no longer merely pulsing. It was vibrating with a deep, internal resonance, warm against her skin. It felt alive, humming in sync with the unwelcome frequency that now permeated her space. Jessica stared at the final message. The words burned into her mind. Spectral coordinate. A frequency, a harmonic, and a phase shift. It was a challenge, a desperate plea, and a death sentence wrapped into one. Audio anomaly hadn't just given her a lead. They had passed on a torch, a ticking time bomb. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was an active, malevolent force. And it was closing in on her. She had the location, or at least the puzzle to find it. She gripped the cylinder tighter, its warmth spreading through her hand. The digital hunt was over. The real one was about to begin. The metallic cylinder, warm and solid in her palm, pulsed with the latent power. It wasn't just a data storage device. It felt like a living thing, a conduit to the terror she'd been tracking. The digital hunt was indeed over, but Jessica knew with a bone-chilling certainty that the real hunt, the one that would demand more than just her intellect, had just begun. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of code and caffeine, now felt like a glass cage, every window a potential breach, every shadow a lurking observer. She moved quickly, her mind racing through possibilities. This wasn't a standard USB drive. Its casing was seamless, a dark, non-reflective alloy. There were no ports, no visible indicators, just a smooth cylindrical form. Her first thought was to connect it to her custom-built rig, hoping for some kind of proprietary interface, but she hesitated. What if it was a trap? What if simply plugging it in activated something irreversible, something that would pinpoint her location or corrupt her systems? Instead, she retrieved a specialized diagnostic scanner from a locked drawer, a relic from her father's old projects, a man who had dabbled in obscure data recovery and cryptography before his own mysterious disappearance years ago. It was a bulky, almost antique device, designed to read unconventional data formats from damaged or unique storage media. She powered it on, its ancient fans whirring to life, a stark contrast to the silent hum of her modern computers. Carefully, she placed the cylinder onto the scanner's inductive plate. A faint blue light pulsed around the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scanner's display flickered, showing a rapidly scrolling series of hexadecimal characters. It was attempting to establish a connection, bypassing traditional protocols. The warmth in the cylinder intensified, almost burning her hand when she instinctively reached out. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The scanner beeped, a low, steady tone, as if wrestling with the cylinder's defenses. Jessica held her breath, her eyes glued to the screen. Finally, a progress bar appeared, inching forward. Encryption detected, the display read. Attempting decryption protocol. This was it, the moment of truth. The decryption process was agonizingly slow. Jessica paced her small living room, the silence punctuated only by the scanner's rhythmic beeps and the frantic drumming of her own heart. She felt a profound sense of isolation, cut off from the world, yet acutely aware of being watched. A shiver traced its way down her spine, a cold sensation that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The air itself felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. After nearly an hour, the scanner chimed triumphantly. Decryption complete. Data stream initiated. Jessica rushed back, her gaze fixed on the screen. A file directory populated, not with a single clear location but with dozens of fragmented files. Most were audio, labeled with cryptic timestamps and serial numbers. Others were text files filled with what looked like journal entries or research notes. She clicked on the first audio file, her finger trembling slightly. A wave of static burst from the scanner's tiny speaker, followed by the unmistakable sound of a howling wind, a desolate, cutting gale that seemed to carry with it the chill of a forgotten place. Then faint, distorted voices, overlapping and indistinct, like ghosts whispering through a storm. A sharp crack like ice shattering, then a muffled scream cut short. The audio ended abruptly. Jessica felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just data. It was a window into someone's final terrifying moments. She played another, then another. Each file painted a fragment of a horrifying picture. Desperate pleas, the crunch of snow underfoot, a strange guttural growl that didn't sound animalistic, followed by a chilling high-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. One recording contained what sounded like a rapid, panicked exchange in a language she didn't recognize, followed by a sudden deafening silence. The text files were equally disturbing. They appeared to be entries from multiple individuals, detailing an expedition into a remote, unforgiving mountain range. The names were unfamiliar. David, Emily, Michael, Sarah, and a group leader named Robert. They spoke of unusual atmospheric phenomena, strange electromagnetic interference, and a growing sense of dread. One entry, dated significantly later than the others, detailed a signal, a repeating, non-natural pulse emanating from deep within the mountains. "It's calling to us," one entry read, "pulling us in. We can't turn back. Robert says it's too important." Another, scrawled almost illegibly, simply stated, "The cold isn't the worst part. It's what the cold hides." But the most critical piece of information wasn't a direct coordinate. Instead, it was a series of geological survey markers, interwoven with astronomical data and a recurring, complex mathematical sequence. It took Jessica another hour, cross-referencing her own extensive databases and running advanced algorithms to finally pinpoint the location. It was a place called the Shadow Peak Mountains, a largely unexplored and notoriously dangerous range in a remote, northern corner of the country. Known for its treacherous terrain, unpredictable blizzards, and sudden severe magnetic anomalies, it was a place few dared to venture, even seasoned explorers. The coordinates led to a specific, high-altitude plateau, a location eerily reminiscent of the desolate landscapes described in the audio files. More precisely, they pointed to a unique rock formation, almost like a natural amphitheater, at the very heart of the anomalies. The journal entries referred to it as the Silent Eye. As the location solidified on her screen, a sudden sharp crack echoed from her kitchen. Jessica froze, every muscle tensed. She slowly turned, her heart hammering against her ribs. The old porcelain teacup she'd left on the counter lay shattered on the tiled floor, as if it had simply exploded from within. There was no earthquake, no tremor, just the inexplicable, violent rupture. A cold dread seeped into her bones. This wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. The malevolent force wasn't just closing in. It was actively making its presence known, a chilling preamble to what awaited her. The air in her apartment grew heavy, thick with an oppressive silence, yet she could almost hear a faint, high-pitched hum, like the one from the audio recording, just at the edge of her perception. She knew with absolute certainty that she had to go to the Shadow Peak Mountains. The cylinder, the audio, the journal entries. They were a desperate plea from the past, a breadcrumb trail leading to a truth that someone or something wanted buried forever. The missing audio wasn't just missing. It had been deliberately hidden, its secrets guarded by an unseen sentinel. Jessica began to move, her fear replaced by a steely resolve. She started pulling out her cold weather gear. Thermal layers, insulated boots, a heavy-duty parka. She checked her satellite phone, her portable GPS, her emergency beacon. She packed a first aid kit, high-energy rations, and a robust set of climbing tools. This wasn't a digital investigation anymore. This was an expedition into the unknown, a journey into the heart of a mystery that had already claimed lives, and now it was beckoning her. The hum in her ears intensified, a low, invasive frequency that seemed to vibrate her very skull. It felt like a warning, a challenge, a promise of the horrors that lay ahead. She was going to the Shadow Peak Mountains. She was going to find out what had happened to Robert, David, Emily, Michael, and Sarah. And she was going to face whatever malevolent force guarded the secrets of the Silent Eye. She zipped up her duffel bag, the hum growing louder, a silent roar in her mind. The digital hunt was over. The real one had just begun, and something was waiting for her. The next morning, the hum was a low thrum beneath her skin, a constant companion that had woven itself into her dreams. She felt a strange certainty, a pull stronger than any logical thought. The coordinates Michael had found, the ones hidden within the anomaly, pointed to a desolate, rarely visited region in the northern reaches of the continent. A place of ancient, weathered stone and unforgiving winds, where the tree line gave way to vast open expanses. Emily packed light but thoroughly. Survival gear, communication devices, a high-resolution drone, and her most trusted audio recording equipment. The journey itself was a test of endurance. Hours blurred into days as she navigated remote highways, then gravel roads, and finally, a barely discernible track that wound through a landscape growing progressively starker. Civilization receded, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the howl of the wind and the persistent hum in her ears, which seemed to grow in intensity with every mile she covered. She reached the designated drop-off point, a small, isolated cabin inhabited by an elderly, weathered man named David, who merely grunted in response to her questions, his eyes holding a resigned weariness. He'd seen people like her before, he implied, drawn to the whispers of the wild. He pointed vaguely north, towards a towering, jagged ridge that looked like the teeth of some colossal beast. Beyond that, he rasped, is where the land forgets itself. The Silent Eye, they call it. Nothing but wind and ghosts up there. He didn't offer a ride, didn't ask her name, just watched as she shouldered her pack, the hum now a resonant vibration in her chest. The climb was brutal. The air thinned and the temperature plummeted, even though it was midsummer. The terrain was treacherous, loose scree giving way to sheer rock faces. Emily pushed herself, fueled by an almost manic energy, driven by the escalating hum that now felt less like an internal sensation and more like an external vibration, a frequency resonating from the very rock beneath her boots. It was almost melodic, yet utterly alien. Hours later, as the sun began its long, slow descent, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and orange, Emily crested the ridge. Below her, sprawled across a vast, crater-like depression, was the Silent Eye. It wasn't a lake as she had vaguely imagined, but a colossal circular depression in the landscape, several miles across, its floor a mosaic of dark, angular stones and patches of stunted, almost petrified vegetation. The most striking feature, however, was in the very center. A perfectly symmetrical, obsidian-black monolith, perhaps 30 feet high, rising from the desolate ground like a spear plunged into the earth. It pulsed faintly with a barely perceptible, almost imperceptible light, and from it the hum emanated, no longer a subtle vibration, but a powerful resonant chord that vibrated through her entire being, rattling her bones, making her teeth ache. She set up a makeshift camp on a sheltered ledge overlooking the eye, the hum now so loud she could almost feel it in the air around her. Her recording equipment was already picking up a strong, consistent frequency. It wasn't just a low-frequency hum. It was a complex series of overlapping tones, almost a language, but one utterly devoid of any human characteristic. She deployed her drone, sending it soaring towards the monolith. The live feed showed the structure in stark detail. It was impossibly smooth, devoid of any seams or markings, reflecting the dying light like polished glass. As the drone approached, the hum intensified, and the image on her screen began to distort, flickering with static. Suddenly, the drone lurched. Emily fought with the controls, but it was as if an invisible hand had snatched it from the air. The feed went black. A moment later, a faint thud echoed from the direction of the monolith. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Whatever this thing was, it was active and it was aware. She spent a restless night, the hum a constant, oppressive presence. Sleep was impossible. Every nerve ending was on edge. Every shadow seemed to writhe. She tried to analyze the audio she'd captured, but it was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. It wasn't just sound. It felt like information, a dense, complex data stream encoded within the frequencies. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for answers, she began her descent into the eye. The air grew colder with every step, a chilling dampness seeping into her bones. The ground beneath her feet felt strangely dead, devoid of the usual sounds of insects or the rustle of unseen creatures. As she drew closer to the monolith, the hum became almost unbearable, a physical pressure on her eardrums, vibrating through her skull. It felt like standing inside a giant bell that was being struck repeatedly. Her boots crunched on the dark, angular stones. She noticed something odd about them. They weren't just dark. They seemed to absorb light, making the immediate vicinity of the monolith feel like twilight even under the midday sun. And then she saw it. Not on the monolith itself, but scattered on the ground around its base. Small metallic fragments, glinting dully. They were too uniform, too perfectly shaped to be natural. Debris. She knelt, picking up one of the fragments. It was cold, incredibly dense, and etched with faint geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure as she turned it in her hand. It felt alien, yet strangely familiar, like a piece of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve her entire life. This wasn't just a natural phenomenon. This was something else entirely. As she stood examining the fragment, a sudden sharp crack echoed through the eye. It wasn't thunder. It was closer, sharper, like dry wood snapping. She spun around, scanning the desolate landscape. Nothing. But the hum changed, a new jarring note entering its complex symphony, a discordant wail that sent a shiver down her spine. Then she saw it, a faint shimmer like heat haze, dancing in the air near the monolith. It wasn't heat. It was a distortion, a ripple in reality itself. And through it, for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a shape. Not a solid form, but an outline, a towering, indistinct figure, dark against the already darkened stones. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the intensified hum and the cold, oppressive silence. Emily's breath hitched. Her scientific mind screamed for a rational explanation, but her gut instinct screamed something far more primal. She clutched the metallic fragment, her eyes darting frantically. Had she seen what she thought she saw? Or was the hum, the isolation, the sheer weirdness of this place finally getting to her? She took a tentative step towards the monolith, towards the shimmering distortion. The air around it felt thick, heavy, as if she were moving through water. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat against the overwhelming hum. And then she saw something else, lying half-buried beneath a pile of the strange, dark stones, right at the base of the monolith. It was a device, old metallic encrusted with what looked like dried mud and rust, but unmistakable. It was a portable audio recorder, of a design that hadn't been manufactured in decades. And as she reached for it, a faint, almost imperceptible red light flickered on its casing, as if it had just activated. The recorder, ancient and caked in the grime of decades, hummed in her hand. The tiny red light pulsed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, a stark contrast to the desolate silence of the icy cavern. Jessica hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Every instinct screamed at her to leave it, to run from this place that felt less like a natural formation and more like a tomb. But the pull of the unknown, the desperate, unyielding need to understand what had truly happened to her Uncle Michael and his team, was stronger. With trembling fingers, she pressed a button on the side, a faded symbol she recognized as play. A harsh crackle of static, sharp and sudden, cut through the quiet, making her jump. It was an old machine, analog, and the sound of its gears grinding to life was almost as unsettling as the silence it broke. Then, faintly at first, the unmistakable roar of wind. Not just a breeze but a gale whipping past a microphone, punctuated by the rhythmic crunch of heavy boots on snow. A voice, gruff and familiar, broke through the wind's howl. "Michael, you hear that? Northridge. Getting worse." It was David's voice, clear as day despite the decades and the distortion. David, her uncle's second in command, a man whose picture hung in her grandmother's house, forever frozen in time, young and full of life. Jessica gasped, a cold knot tightening in her stomach, a wave of profound sorrow mixed with terrifying anticipation. This was it, the missing piece. Another voice, calmer, steadier, but with an underlying current of strain, responded. "I hear it, David. Emily, Sarah, stay tight. We're almost to the next marker. The storm's coming in faster than forecast." This was Michael, her uncle. His voice, preserved on this fragile tape, was like a ghost whispering directly into her ear, a chilling echo from a past she desperately wanted to uncover. The raw emotion in his tone was palpable. The audio continued, a harrowing real-time account of their struggle against the elements. She heard their labored breathing, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of their ice axes against solid ground, the occasional shouted instruction over the increasing din of the wind. They were clearly pushing themselves, fighting against a rapidly deteriorating situation, their voices growing hoarse with effort and cold. She could almost feel the biting cold herself, the sting of ice on her cheeks, the sheer exhaustion. Then a subtle disquieting change. The wind seemed to die down slightly, replaced by a different kind of sound. A low resonant hum. It started subtly, almost imperceptible, like a distant generator struggling to start, but it grew. And it wasn't natural. It was too deep, too steady, too deliberate. "What is that?" Emily's voice, sharp with concern, cut through the recording. "Did anyone else hear that? Sounded like a drone?" Sarah ventured, her voice laced with uncertainty, a tremor of fear seeping in. "But too deep. And too close." "No," Michael interjected, his voice now devoid of its earlier calm, replaced by a new, urgent edge. "It's not a drone. Listen. It's coming from above us." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken dread. The hum intensified, vibrating through the small speaker, making the recorder itself tremble slightly in Jessica's hand. It was a deep, guttural thrum, a sound that seemed to resonate in her bones, a low, ominous frequency fundamentally out of place in the wild. It wasn't mechanical in the way of an engine. It felt organic yet utterly alien, like the sound of some colossal, unseen creature stirring. Then a sudden blinding flash. A raw, violent sound like static discharge, followed by a collective gasp from the recording. The wind picked up again, but it was different now, carrying with it a strange metallic tang that seemed to prickle at Jessica's own senses. An imaginary scent of ozone and something acrid. "Michael, look!" David yelled, his voice raw with fear, cracking with undisguised terror. "Up there! What is that?" More gasps, choked and horrified. The sound of scrambling, frantic movement, equipment clattering against rock and ice. A muffled scream quickly stifled, as if someone had fallen or been dragged down. "Get down! Everyone, get down!" Michael's voice, a desperate roar, filled with a primal protective fury. The hum intensified to an unbearable pitch, A high-frequency whine that made Jessica wince even though it was decades old, making her teeth ache. It felt like her eardrums were vibrating, threatening to burst. And then a series of rapid rhythmic thuds against what sounded like a tint canvas. Not footsteps, but something being dropped or thrown with immense inhuman force. The impact sounds were sickeningly solid. They're hitting the tent. Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking, dissolving into a sob. What are they doing? Who is they? Emily demanded, her voice trembling, laced with confusion and mounting panic. I don't see anything. Michael, the perimeter. David shouted, his voice strained, desperate. It's not holding. The sound of the thuds grew more frantic, more violent, each impact echoing with a terrifying finality. Fabric ripping, a sustained, tearing sound, followed by the splintering of poles. The wind howled, but underneath it, a new sound emerged. A soft, rustling, skittering sound, like dozens of tiny claws on icy ground, moving with impossible speed. And then a low, guttural growl, unlike any animal Jessica had ever heard. It was deep, resonating, and incredibly close, a sound of pure, unadulterated menace. Don't look at it. Don't look directly at it. Michael's voice strained, panicked, a warning born of pure terror. A series of quick, sharp cracks like ice breaking under immense pressure, or perhaps bone. Another scream, cut short, abruptly silenced. The skittering sounds multiplied, surrounding the microphone, a chilling symphony of movement. The growling continued, closer, more insistent, a predatory purr that turned her blood to ice. Jessica's breath hitched, frozen in her throat. She felt a primal terror grip her, a cold dread that seeped into her bones. This wasn't just a blizzard or an accident, or even a wild animal attack. This was something else entirely. Something alien. Something predatory. Something that hunted with an intelligence beyond human comprehension. Where did they come from? Emily sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. There was nothing. They were always here, Michael whispered, his voice barely audible amidst the chaos, a chillingly calm statement amidst the cacophony. They were waiting. His voice was laced with a profound, soul-shattering realization, a horror that transcended mere fear. Then a new sound, a wet tearing noise, a gurgle, a sickening squelch. Silence. And then another squelch followed by a series of soft, sticky impacts, as if something heavy was being dragged across the snow. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry, her stomach churning. She could almost smell the blood, the fear, the biting cold of that long-lost night. This wasn't just an audio recording. It was a window into a nightmare, an unfiltered glimpse into her uncle's team's final moments. The skittering continued, moving away from the microphone, then back again, circling. The growling, too, seemed to circle, a low, satisfied rumble. The wind was still present, but now it seemed to carry whispers, faint and indistinct, just at the edge of hearing. Were they Michael's last words? Or something else entirely, something that mocked the human tongue? Suddenly the hum returned, but this time it was descending, growing louder, closer, more powerful. The air crackled with a palpable energy, making the hairs on Jessica's arms stand on end. A high-pitched, almost ultrasonic whine that made her own teeth ache, a pressure building behind her eyes. And then the unmistakable sound of tearing canvas, directly at the microphone, a final violent rip. A desperate, choked cry from David, quickly, brutally silenced. The recorder fell silent. Not with a click or a whir, not with the natural fade of a dying battery, but with an abrupt, unnatural cessation of all sound, as if the battery had simply given out mid-scream, mid-tear. The red light, however, continued its slow, steady pulse, a solitary beacon in the darkness. Jessica stared at the device, her fingers numb, her mind reeling, struggling to process the horrifying symphony. What had she just heard? What were those things? They were always here. They were waiting. Michael's words echoed in her skull, a terrifying prophecy, a chilling confirmation of something malevolent. She tried to rationalize it. A bear? A pack of wolves? A rogue human attack? But the sounds, the deep, resonant hum, the impossible skittering, the rhythmic thuds on the tent, the specific inhuman growl, and Michael's utter, abject terror, not of an animal, but of something far more intelligent, far more insidious. Something that waited in the shadows of the world. Her gaze darted around the icy cavern. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more oppressive, no longer comforting but suffocating. Every tiny creak of the ice, every drip of melting water, sounded like the skittering claws she just heard, amplified by her paranoia. She felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability, an awareness that she was utterly alone in a place that had witnessed unspeakable horrors, a place that now felt aware of her presence. The air grew colder, if that was even possible in this frozen tomb. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration started in the ground beneath her feet, a low tremor that she felt more than heard, a subtle resonance. It was eerily reminiscent of the hum from the recording, but far more subtle, as if a massive, unseen engine was stirring deep within the earth, awakening. She clutched the recorder tighter, its plastic casing now feeling strangely warm against her frozen fingers. The red light pulsed, a tiny, defiant heartbeat in the vast, silent void. She had come here seeking answers about her uncle's disappearance, hoping for a simple, tragic explanation. A fall, an avalanche, the harsh, indifferent hand of nature. But what she had found was infinitely more terrifying. She had stumbled upon a truth that defied logic, a horror that had been buried beneath ice and snow for decades, a malevolent presence that had been waiting to be unearthed. The vibration intensified, the low hum growing stronger, more defined, no longer subtle, but a palpable thrumming beneath her feet. It wasn't coming from the recorder, it was coming from everywhere, from the bedrock of the mountain. The walls of the cavern seemed to resonate with it, a deep, resonant growl echoing through the ice. A thin crack appeared in the solid ice wall nearest her, spiderwebbing outwards with an audible snap, a sound like a gunshot in the space. Panic flared, sharp and cold, a jolt of adrenaline. This wasn't just an old recording, it was a warning. And whatever had been waiting for Michael and his team, it was still waiting. And now, as the cavern groaned and shifted around her, it knew she was here. It was no longer a question of what had happened, but what was happening now. The red light on the recorder pulsed faster, a frantic, urgent beat, as if sensing the impending danger, as if it had activated not just to play its chilling message, but to warn her. The hum grew into a roar, shaking the very foundations of the cavern, sending fine shivers of ice dust raining down. Jessica had to get out. Now. Jessica had to get out. Now. The roar wasn't just shaking the cavern, it was tearing it apart. Jagged shards of ice, sharp as knives, splintered from the ceiling, narrowly missing her head. The ground beneath her feet buckled and cracked, fissures snaking across the crystalline floor, glowing with an ominous internal light before swallowing chunks of rock. She scrambled, her hands tearing against the rough ice, pulling herself towards the narrow opening she'd used to enter. The air grew thick with a metallic tang, and a wave of intense cold washed over her, far beyond the natural chill of the mountain. It felt like the very essence of warmth was being ripped from the air. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the mountain's death rattle. The device still clutched tightly in her numb fingers, pulsed with an internal light, a deep, unsettling violet that seemed to absorb all other colors. It wasn't just playing a message, it was reacting. Or perhaps it was causing this. A horrifying thought, quickly dismissed by the memory of the chilling whisper. It's waking. No, this was a consequence, not a cause. A consequence of her presence, of its activation. She threw herself forward, ignoring the searing pain in her knee as she collided with a fallen chunk of ice. The opening was still there, a sliver of darkness against the chaotic light of the cavern, but the passage itself seemed to be constricting, the ice walls groaning under immense pressure. It felt like the mountain was trying to swallow itself whole. Dust, thick and suffocating, choked her lungs with every desperate gasp. She tasted grit, ice, and fear. Just as she reached the mouth of the passage, a colossal chunk of the cavern ceiling detached with a deafening crack, plummeting directly where she had been moments before. The impact sent a shockwave through the ground, throwing her violently into the narrow tunnel. She slid, tumbling over uneven ice, the device digging painfully into her palm. Her head slammed against the hard surface, stars exploding behind her eyes, but the primal urge to survive screamed louder than the pain. She had to keep moving. The tunnel was a labyrinth of collapsing ice and rock. Each step was a gamble, each handhold uncertain. The roar from the cavern behind her began to fade, replaced by the grating, groaning sounds of the mountain settling, shifting, and sealing itself off. It wasn't just a collapse, it was a deliberate closure. As if the mountain was a living thing, closing its wound or perhaps its prison door. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of desperate crawling and climbing, she saw it, the faint, diffused light of dawn filtering through the snow at the tunnel's exit. With a final surge of adrenaline, She clawed her way out, bursting into the biting, frigid air. She collapsed onto the snow-covered slope, gasping, her body trembling uncontrollably. The wind immediately began to sting her exposed skin, but the cold was a welcome relief compared to the oppressive, soul-numbing chill of the cavern. She rolled onto her back, staring up at the pale, bruised sky. The mountain peak loomed silently above her, a monolithic sentinel. But it wasn't silent. A low, resonant hum, almost imperceptible to the ear, vibrated through the very ground she lay on. It was different from the roar of the collapse, more subtle, more pervasive. It was the sound of something awake. Slowly, painfully, Jessica pushed herself up, her muscles screaming in protest. She looked back at the entrance, now a jagged, half-collapsed maw in the side of the mountain, already being swallowed by fresh snowfall. It was impossible to tell where the tunnel had even been just minutes later. The mountain had sealed itself, leaving no trace. Her gaze fell to the device still clutched in her hand. The violet light had faded, replaced by a soft, steady green glow. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. It had saved her. It had warned her. But what was it? And what had she just done? The chilling whisper from the audio replayed in her mind. "It's waking. We contained it. For all our sakes, do not disturb its slumber." And then her father's desperate, broken voice. "Jessica, if you're hearing this, run. Leave this place. Don't look for me. Don't look for it." Her father, Michael. He knew. He hadn't just been researching some geological anomaly or a forgotten historical event. He had been involved in something far more profound, far more dangerous. He had been trying to contain something, a primordial power perhaps, a force that defied explanation. And she, in her grief-stricken search for answers, had stumbled into his nightmare and potentially unleashed it. The green glow of the device intensified slightly, and she noticed something new. On its smooth obsidian surface, a series of faint, almost invisible symbols began to shimmer into existence. They weren't like any language she knew. They were fluid, geometric, shifting and interlocking in a complex dance of light. As she watched, mesmerized, one of the symbols detached itself from the pattern, growing brighter, larger. It looked like a stylized eye or perhaps a keyhole. A new wave of dread washed over her. This wasn't just a data recorder. It was a control panel, a fragment of a larger mechanism. And the message, the warning, was not just about it waking, but about her role in that awakening. The device wasn't just a record. It was a trigger. The mountain hummed. The air vibrated. She felt a profound shift in the atmosphere around her, a subtle but undeniable change in the very fabric of reality. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a deeper, more ancient layer beneath the familiar world. She had to get off this mountain, but not to escape, not just to survive. She had to understand what her father was doing, what he had found, and what exactly he had tried to keep contained. And most importantly, what it was and what its awakening meant for the world. The urgency of her situation was no longer about her immediate safety, but about something far grander, far more terrifying. As she began to pick her way down the treacherous slope, the device still warm and glowing in her hand, she noticed something else. Something that made her blood run cold, despite the sub-zero temperatures. Embedded in a sheer rock face, partially obscured by a fresh dusting of snow, was a symbol identical to the one now glowing on her device. The stylized eye. It was ancient, weathered, carved into the very stone of the mountain. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a marker, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. And then, just as she focused on the symbol, a glint of metal caught her eye a short distance away. Half buried in a snowdrift, a small insulated container. It looked like a survival kit, but far too small to be her father's main gear. Hesitantly, she approached it, her heart thudding with a renewed sense of foreboding. The container was made of a dark, almost black alloy, unlike anything she'd seen. There was no visible lock, no clasp, just a smooth, seamless surface. But as her hand, still clutching the glowing device, hovered over the container, the green light pulsed in sync with the symbol carved into the mountain. And then, with a soft, almost imperceptible hiss, the container sprang open. Inside, nestled amongst a few dehydrated rations and a thermal blanket, was a small, leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn, its pages yellowed with age. And on the very first page, scrawled in her father's unmistakable handwriting, were two words that instantly froze her to the core: echoing the chilling whisper from the cavern, but with an added layer of desperate finality. "It remembers." The ink, faded with age, seemed to throb with a silent warning. "It remembers." The words weren't just a chilling echo, they were a confirmation. Her father knew. He hadn't just been protective, he'd been aware. A cold dread, far deeper than anything she'd felt in that cavern, settled in Emily's chest. This wasn't a random anomaly. It was something conscious, something ancient, something with a memory. With trembling fingers, Emily turned the page. The journal wasn't a chronological diary, but a collection of observations, sketches, and cryptic notes, dating back years before her mother's death, even before Emily was born. Her father, Daniel, had been a quiet man, an armchair historian with a fascination for local folklore and unexplained phenomena. But this journal revealed a man driven by something far more profound, something bordering on obsession. The early entries detailed strange occurrences in the remote wilderness surrounding their small town, unusual animal behavior, localized electrical disturbances, and inexplicable disappearances that predated Michael and Jessica. He'd meticulously cross-referenced old newspaper clippings, local legends, and even obscure academic papers on geophysical anomalies. He'd initially theorized about a rare geological phenomenon, perhaps an electromagnetic field affecting the region. But then the tone shifted. "August 14th, Emily read, her voice a whispered tremor in the silent room. "The humming is more pronounced. Not a sound, not really. More of a vibration. Felt it in my teeth today, walking near the old logging trails at the base of Blackwood Peak. The compass went wild, just like the stories of the whispering peaks my grandfather used to tell. He said people would wander off, drawn by a sound only they could hear. A call." Emily's breath hitched. A call, like the whisper she'd heard. The journal continued, detailing Daniel's increasingly bold expeditions into the wilderness. He wasn't just observing, he was tracking something. He described finding patches of ground where all plant life seemed to wither instantly, leaving behind a fine ash-like residue. He documented strange, almost geometric patterns in the snow, too perfect to be natural, too fleeting to be explained. Then came the entries about the passage. Daniel didn't call it a cave or a cavern. He used the term passage, always capitalized as if it were a proper noun, a designation of immense significance. November 3rd, one entry read. "Found it. The source. Not a natural formation. Too smooth. Too deliberate. The air inside is different. Heavy. Like standing at the edge of a deep ocean trench, but on land. The humming is strongest here. It's not geological. It's alive. Or at least it hosts something alive. Something ancient. Something that watches." Emily's eyes widened. Something that watches. Her father had felt it too. The oppressive presence, the feeling of being scrutinized. He'd even sketched the interior of the passage, crude drawings that nevertheless captured the unsettling smoothness of the walls, the faint, shimmering light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. He'd noted the strange echoes, the way sound seemed to distort and twist within its confines. He wrote about the whisper, not as a sound he heard but as an impression. "It doesn't speak with words, not as we understand them," he'd written. "It speaks with memory, with a resonance that bypasses the ears and goes straight to the mind. It plants thoughts, desires, or perhaps it extracts them." This sent a shiver down Emily's spine. Extracts them. Was that what happened to Michael and Jessica? Were their deepest desires, their secret fears, somehow used against them? What about her? What had the whisper tried to extract from her? The journal entries grew more frantic, more desperate. Daniel's handwriting became less precise, his sentences shorter, punctuated by exclamation marks. He detailed his growing realization that the entity wasn't just a passive phenomenon. It was active. It was feeding. January 22nd, an entry stated, "It needs energy. Not electrical. Not thermal. Something else. Life force. Consciousness. It draws people in. The call isn't just a lure. It's a siphoning. Takes them but it doesn't destroy them. Not entirely. It absorbs them. Their experiences, their memories, their very essence. It grows. It remembers." Emily gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Absorbs them." This wasn't a simple disappearance. This was something far more horrifying. Michael and Jessica weren't just gone. They were part of something else. And the thought that they might still be aware, still conscious within that oppressive entity, was a terror she couldn't bear. Her father had tried to warn people. He'd gone to local authorities, to academics, even to a few fringe paranormal investigators. But he had no tangible proof, only his increasingly wild theories. They dismissed him, labeled him eccentric, then delusional. He'd eventually retreated, growing more reclusive, more secretive, consumed by his solitary investigation. "The patterns are cyclical," he wrote in a later entry. "It's like a tide. It waxes and wanes. The call intensifies every few years, drawing in more. It's not random. There's an intelligence, or at least a primal instinct, behind it. It's a predator, an ancient one, slumbering, but awakening periodically to feed." He tried to find a way to stop it, or at least to understand its rhythm, its weakness. He'd spent countless nights in the wilderness, observing, recording. And then Emily found the section about the audio tape. The frequency, Daniel had written emphatically. There's a specific frequency, a resonance. It's not static. It shifts. It's like a language, but one that bypasses sound. I've tried to capture it, to isolate it, to understand its signature. I believe it's how it communicates, how it calls, and perhaps how it can be countered. He detailed his attempts to record the ambient frequencies within the passage, using specialized equipment he'd painstakingly acquired. He'd spent weeks, months trying to filter out the natural sounds, the geological hum, to isolate the unique resonance of the entity. April 19th, a chilling entry read, "I got it. Bits and pieces. A coherent pattern. It's not just a hum. It's a chorus. A multitude of voices, layered, distorted, yet familiar. I heard them. The ones who are gone. Their echoes, their final thoughts woven into the fabric of its being. It's like a living archive of every soul it has ever absorbed." Emily felt a wave of nausea. Her father had heard Michael and Jessica on that tape. He'd heard everyone who had ever vanished. The missing audio wasn't just a record of a strange phenomenon. It was a horrifying testament to the entity's victims, their consciousnesses trapped, reverberating within its alien structure. "The tape is too dangerous to leave exposed," Daniel had written in a later, almost panicked entry. "It's a direct link, a conduit. If the wrong person finds it, or if it finds it, the information is vital, but the medium itself is a trap. I've hidden it. Deep. Safe. Only Emily must find it. She'll understand. She'll know what to do. She's strong. Stronger than she knows." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Her father hadn't just been protecting her. He'd been preparing her. He'd known she would eventually seek answers, that she would be drawn to the very mystery he tried to shield her from. He'd left her a trail, a legacy of understanding, a weapon. The final entries in the journal were less about the entity and more about a desperate plea, a fragmented plan. He tried to develop a counter-frequency, a way to disrupt the entity's call, to sever its connection to the physical world, or perhaps even to release the consciousnesses it had absorbed. He theorized about using a specific resonant frequency, amplified, to create a kind of white noise against its call. "The key is the missing audio," he'd scrawled, underlining the words multiple times. "It contains the entity's full signature, its true voice. To fight it, you must understand it. To understand it, you must hear it. But you must also be careful. To hear it is to be vulnerable. To understand it is to risk being consumed." Emily stared at the last legible page. Her father had described a specific location where he'd hidden the tape. Not in their house, not in a bank vault, but in a place he considered both incredibly secure and symbolically significant. A place tied to their family history, a place only she would recognize. "The old oak," the last entry read. "By the creek, where we carved our initials. The hollow beneath the oldest roots. It's sealed, protected. The tape is in a waterproof, shielded container. Don't listen to it without protection. Don't listen to it unless you are ready to understand the true nature of what lurks in the shadows of the past. And remember, Emily. It remembers, and it will know you are listening." The journal dropped from Emily's numb fingers, clattering softly on the wooden floor. The silence in the room was suddenly deafening, punctuated only by the frantic beat of her own heart. The pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying mosaic. Her father hadn't just disappeared. He dedicated his life to this, and perhaps in the end, he'd paid the ultimate price. He hadn't been able to stop it, but he'd left her the tools, the knowledge, and the ultimate weapon, the missing audio. She understood now. The whisper wasn't just a lure. It was a prelude. The entity wasn't just an anomaly. It was a living, remembering consciousness, a collector of souls. And the audio tape wasn't just a recording. It was a direct line to its core, a way to understand its power and perhaps a way to unravel it. The terrifying truth was laid bare before her. She had to find that tape. She had to listen. She had to finish what her father started. But a chilling realization settled over her. Her father had found it. He had listened and he was gone. Was she walking into the same trap? Or was she finally ready to face the music? The old oak, the creek, the hollow roots. The location was imprinted in her mind. She knew where she had to go. She knew what she had to do. The past was calling, and now she had the key to its terrible song. The biting wind whipped around Emily as she ascended the final treacherous stretch of Blackwood Pass. The sun, a pale anemic disk, was already bowing towards the western peaks, casting long fractured shadows across the ancient, gnarled landscape. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a visible testament to the effort it took to keep moving, to ignore the burning in her lungs and the tremor in her legs. For weeks, the pass had been a haunting whisper in her mind, a relentless pull she couldn't ignore. Now it was a roar, a palpable presence that seemed to press down on her from the towering pines and the silent, snow-dusted rocks. She pushed through a thicket of stunted evergreens, their needles scratching at her jacket, and then there it was, the old oak. It stood like a sentinel, its massive twisted limbs reaching skyward, devoid of leaves but teeming with an ancient, silent power. Its roots, thick as anaconda coils, snaked across the uneven ground, some partially exposed, others plunging deep into the frozen earth. And just as the cryptic message had described, a small half-frozen creek trickled beside it, its murmur barely audible beneath the wind's mournful sigh. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the wilderness. This was it, the place, the culmination of years of whispered rumors, forgotten files, and the chilling conviction that something truly terrible had happened here. She moved towards the oak, her gaze sweeping over its immense base, searching for the hollow roots. The key, a small tarnished brass item with an unusual, almost abstract design, felt heavy in her gloved hand. It was more than just a key, it was a promise, a burden, a conduit to a truth that had been buried for decades. She knelt, her knees protesting the cold, and ran her hand along the rough bark, tracing the contours of the exposed roots. The creek gurgled nearby, an indifferent witness to the unfolding drama. Her fingers, numb with cold and anticipation, finally brushed against a section of root that felt different. Not natural. It was a subtle seam, a perfectly cut line in the otherwise organic chaos, hidden beneath a thin layer of moss and accumulated debris. With a surge of adrenaline, she dug away the detritus, exposing a small, almost imperceptible wooden panel, perfectly camouflaged. A small key-shaped indentation was at its center. Her hand trembled as she inserted the brass key. It slid in smoothly, a perfect fit. A soft click echoed in the stillness, startling a raven from a nearby branch. The panel didn't swing open. Instead, it slid inward with a faint hiss, revealing a dark recess. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried leaves and what looked like a faded, waterproof cloth, was a small rectangular device. It was an old field recorder, robust and built to withstand the elements, its metal casing dulled by time but remarkably intact. A tiny, almost imperceptible red light on its side was still faintly glowing, powered by what must have been an incredibly long-lasting battery. Emily carefully retrieved the recorder. Its weight felt significant, like holding a piece of history, a sealed vault of secrets. She brushed away the clinging dirt, her eyes scanning its familiar controls. There were only a few buttons: record, play, stop, and a small volume dial. The play button seemed to beckon, a silent command. Taking a deep breath, she pressed it. For a moment, nothing but static filled the air, a soft hiss that seemed to amplify the vast emptiness of the pass. Then a voice, tinny and distant, but unmistakably clear, broke through. Logger. Day 3. Readings are unprecedented. Professor Miller, I've never seen anything like this. The seismic activity isn't tectonic. It's rhythmic. Almost artificial. The voice belonged to Sarah Jenkins, a brilliant young geologist who had vanished with Professor David Miller's team over 30 years ago. Emily recognized it from the few snippets of public interviews that had survived. A shiver, colder than the wind, ran down her spine. This was it. The missing audio. Another voice, deeper, more authoritative, followed. Understood, Sarah. Mark, Jessica, keep your eyes peeled. We need to locate the source. These energy signatures, they're localized, powerful, and utterly unlike anything in the geological record for Blackwood Pass. It's almost as if something is generating them. Intentionally. This was Professor Miller, his voice tinged with a blend of scientific curiosity and growing unease. The audio continued, filled with the sounds of crunching snow, heavy breathing, and the occasional snap of a twig. The team was clearly moving, trekking deeper into the pass. Professor, over here! A younger voice, presumably Mark's, suddenly cut through. Look at this, it's a fissure, but it's too clean. Too perfectly angled. And the heat? It's radiating from within. A collective gasp followed. My God, Sarah whispered. It's not natural. This isn't a geological formation. It's a structure. The sounds changed, becoming more muffled, suggesting they had entered some kind of enclosed space. The wind noise vanished, replaced by a low humming thrum. It's massive, Jessica's voice, full of awe and trepidation. Underground. And these walls, they're metal. Some kind of alloy. What is this place? Professor Miller's voice, now closer to the recorder, was laced with a dawning horror. This isn't an anomaly, it's an installation. A hidden facility. The energy, it's being harnessed. Or created. But for what? The humming intensified, becoming a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to shake the very recorder. Then another sound emerged, distant at first, then growing steadily louder. A high-pitched whine like massive turbines spooling up, or some immense machinery activating. Professor, the air pressure is dropping. Mark cried out, his voice now laced with panic. And the energy readings are peaking. It's overloading. They're running a test. Sarah gasped, her voice trembling. A controlled reaction. But it's too powerful. This isn't just research, David. This is a weapon. The whine reached an unbearable crescendo, followed by a series of deep guttural thumps that vibrated through the recording. It sounded like something immense was moving, shifting, perhaps even breaking within the hidden facility. We need to get out, Professor Miller shouted, his calm demeanor shattered. This is beyond anything we imagined. This isn't just a secret. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. We have to expose this. Then a new sound, chillingly distinct, entered the recording. Footsteps. Not the heavy boots of the research team, but lighter, more deliberate metallic clicks against a hard surface. And voices. Muffled at first, then clearer, speaking in low, urgent tones. They weren't speaking scientific terms. They were giving orders. Intrusion detected. Containment protocol initiated. Locate and neutralize. Panic erupted on the audio. They know we're here. Jessica screamed. Run. Get the recorder out. Make sure someone finds this. Professor Miller's voice was desperate, fading in and out amidst the rising chaos. They're trying to hide it. This isn't an accident. It's a project. A weapon of incredible power. They are building something here. Something that could destroy everything. The footsteps grew closer, punctuated by what sounded like a scuffle. A grunt. A gasp. The metallic clicks were now accompanied by the unmistakable thwack of heavy impacts. Sarah. Mark. Jessica. Professor Miller's voice was a raw cry of anguish. They're here. They're taking them. Then a final horrifying sequence of sounds. A struggle, a muffled yell, a sickening crunch, and the sound of someone falling heavily. The recorder seemed to tumble, hitting something hard, scraping against a rough surface. The humming of the machinery continued, indifferent. The low, urgent voices of the unknown individuals were now very close, almost whispering. Secure the device. Ensure no data leaves the site. Sweep the sector. A final choked, ragged breath. And then silence. A profound, terrifying silence broken only by the persistent, cold hum of the hidden machinery and the soft hiss of the static. The red light on the recorder flickered, then went dark. The battery, after 30 years, had finally given out. Emily stood frozen, the field recorder clutched in her hand, the chilling reverberations of the recording still echoing in her mind. The wind, which had seemed so loud moments ago, was now a distant murmur. Her own breathing was ragged, shallow. It wasn't an avalanche. It wasn't extreme weather. It was murder. A systematic, cold-blooded elimination of a research team who had stumbled upon a secret so profound, so dangerous, that its existence had to be erased from history. Blackwood Pass was not just a place of natural beauty and rugged isolation. It was a tomb, a cover-up, a silent witness to a grave injustice. And the missing audio wasn't just a record of their final moments. It was a confession, a warning, a desperate plea from beyond the grave. The key hadn't just unlocked a compartment, it had unlocked a Pandora's box. The terrible song was the truth of a clandestine operation, a hidden weapon, and the ruthless individuals who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. She was holding evidence of a decades-old crime, a conspiracy that reached far beyond the remote mountains of Blackwood Pass. But now she wasn't just an investigator. She was a target. The people who had silenced Professor Miller and his team would undoubtedly have contingency plans, layers of protection, and an unwavering resolve to keep their secrets buried. If they knew she had this, a cold dread settled deep in her bones. She wasn't just facing the music, she was holding the score, and the melody was one of immense danger. The past had given up its secret, but the war for its truth had only just begun. Emily knew what she had to do, but the path ahead was shrouded in shadows, and the players in this deadly game were still very much alive. Emily knew what she had to do, but the path ahead was shrouded in shadows, and the players in this deadly game were still very much alive. The chilling realization that the past held a secret far more sinister than any natural disaster or isolated tragedy settled deep within Emily's bones. It wasn't just about the missing audio anymore. It was about the orchestrated silence, the meticulously constructed lies, and the powerful forces determined to keep the truth buried. She grasped the worn notebook, Michael's last entries a testament to their bravery, and the compact, rugged audio recorder, its tiny indicator light a beacon in the encroaching darkness. This wasn't just a personal quest for answers. It was a war for justice, and Emily was about to launch the first strike. Her first move was strategic, not impulsive. She couldn't trust the authorities. They had been compromised or misled for too long. She needed a voice, a platform that could amplify the truth beyond the reach of those who sought to silence it. Emily thought of Daniel Hayes, a seasoned investigative journalist whose career had been sidelined after he tried to expose a major corporate scandal years ago. He was cynical, yes, but he was also uncompromisingly ethical and fearless. Exactly what she needed. She used a burner phone, bought with cash from a nondescript convenience store miles from her apartment, to contact him. The conversation was brief, cryptic. "Daniel, it's Emily. I have something about the pass. Something big. Meet me at the old library archives tomorrow midday. Come alone, and don't tell anyone you're meeting me." Daniel, recognizing the urgency in her voice and the implied danger, simply agreed. He knew Emily wasn't one to cry wolf. The next morning, Emily prepared. She made multiple encrypted copies of the audio file, storing them on untraceable drives and even uploading a heavily encrypted version to a secure, decentralized server, set to release if she failed to check in within a specific time frame. A dead man's switch. She wasn't just going to hand over the truth, she was going to unleash it. As she made her way to the library, a gnawing paranoia began to creep in. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every passing vehicle felt like a potential threat. She knew they were watching. Her movements had been too deliberate, her inquiries too pointed for her to remain unnoticed by the architects of the cover-up. Inside the hushed, cavernous silence of the library archives, Daniel Hayes was already waiting, his face etched with a familiar weariness that belied a keen intellect. He looked up as Emily approached, his eyes scanning the room, a practiced reflex. "Emily," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," she replied, sliding into the chair opposite him. "I've seen the truth, and it wants to stay buried." She placed the rugged audio recorder on the table between them, its presence a stark contrast to the ancient texts surrounding them. Emily then pulled out a small encrypted USB drive. "This is it, Daniel. The missing audio. But it's more than just the sounds of their final moments. It's the key to everything." Before Daniel could even reach for it, a voice cut through the silence of the archives, cold and authoritative. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Miss Davies." Emily's blood ran cold. Standing at the end of the aisle, flanked by two imposing figures in dark suits, was a man she recognized instantly from the fragmented reports she'd pieced together. Director Thorne. He was the CEO of Ethel Corp, a seemingly legitimate energy research corporation whose name had surfaced in connection with the pass, always just out of reach, always denied. His face was a mask of calculated calm. His eyes, however, held a chilling intensity. "Director Thorne," Emily said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I should have known you'd be listening." Thorne stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the audio recorder. "You've been very persistent, Ms. Davies. Foolishly so. You've stumbled into something far beyond your comprehension." "I comprehend plenty," Emily shot back. "I comprehend that Ethel Corp was conducting illegal experiments at the pass. I comprehend that Michael and his team stumbled upon it, and you covered it up. And I comprehend that you've been silencing anyone who gets close to the truth ever since." Daniel Hayes, ever the journalist, remained stoic, observing the unfolding drama, his hand subtly reaching for his own discreet recording device. Thorne chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Experiments? My dear Ms. Davies, we were on the verge of a breakthrough. A clean energy solution that would revolutionize global power, solve the energy crisis for generations. But every great leap carries inherent risks. The pass, it wasn't just a location. It was a unique geological anomaly, rich in a particular mineral resonance that amplified our field generators beyond anything we could have predicted." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "The hikers, they weren't murdered in cold blood, Ms. Davies. Not in the way you imagine. They were caught in the periphery of a catastrophic containment failure, a resonance cascade. The energy field collapsed violently and instantaneously. It wasn't a biological agent or a creature. It was pure, raw energy destabilizing matter at a cellular level. It explains the strange injuries, the rapid decomposition, the psychological terror. It was horrific, yes, but it was an accident. An unforeseen side effect of pushing the boundaries of science." Emily felt a wave of nausea. The truth, stripped bare, was almost more terrifying than any monster. "And the audio? What does that contain, Director? The sound of your breakthrough tearing people apart." Thorne's composure finally cracked, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. "The audio? It contains the sonic signature of the field's collapse. And, regrettably, the panicked voices of my own research team, discussing the containment breach and the unforeseen resonance cascade moments before we initiated a full-scale shutdown and evacuation. It is irrefutable proof of our involvement and the inherent volatility of the project. It would destroy Ethel Corp, Ms. Davies. It would plunge the world into an energy crisis far worse than any problem we sought to solve. Billions of dollars, years of research, countless jobs. All gone. For what? To expose an accident that can never be replicated, never understood again without risking further catastrophe." He took another step closer, his voice dropping to a persuasive, almost pleading tone. "Think, Ms. Davies. What good will come of this? You'll be vilified, a pariah, hunted by those who believe you've jeopardized national security. But you don't have to be. Give me the audio. Let me make this right. I can offer you a life of comfort, security, anonymity, anything you desire. For your silence." Emily looked from Thorne to Daniel, then back to the audio recorder. "You think I want money? You think I want comfort?" Her voice rose, filled with a righteous fury. "Michael and his friends died in agony, Director. Their families were given lies. The truth, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how dangerous, deserves to be heard. It's not about revenge, Thorne. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring this never happens again." She held up the small USB drive, a defiant glint in her eyes. "It's too late, Director. The audio is already out. I set a dead man's switch. If I don't check in within the next 10 minutes, the entire file, along with my compiled research, is released to every major news outlet, every independent journalist, every whistleblower platform across the globe. You can take me, you can try to silence Daniel, but you can't stop what's already in motion." A cold dread washed over Thorne's face. He signaled his men, but it was already too late. Emily watched her phone, a timer counting down the final seconds. Asterisk beep, 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 asterisk. The timer hit 0. A notification flashed across Emily's phone screen. Transmission confirmed. Public release initiated. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor shook the library, as if the world itself was reacting to the unleashed truth. Thorne's face contorted in a silent snarl of rage and defeat. His men moved, but Emily knew it was futile. The signal was out. The truth was free. Within hours, the world erupted. The missing audio from the pass, once a whisper in the dark, became a deafening roar. The distinct, unnatural hum, followed by the chilling screams and the panicked voices of Thorne's team, echoed across every news channel, every social media feed. Ethel Corp's stock plummeted, investigations were launched, and Director Thorne, along with his co-conspirators, became the subject of an international manhunt. Emily, a reluctant hero, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Her apartment became a temporary fortress, guarded by federal agents, as the weight of what she had done settled upon her. The pass was declared an exclusion zone, its secrets finally brought into the harsh light of public scrutiny, its dangerous energies now under strict scientific containment. The initial official explanation of a mysterious unknown force was shattered, replaced by the terrifying reality of human ambition pushed too far, of scientific hubris leading to unimaginable catastrophe. Michael and his friends, once mere footnotes in a bizarre cold case, became symbols of truth sacrificed for progress. Emily often found herself staring at the rugged audio recorder, its tiny indicator light now dark. The battle for truth had been won, but the war for its consequences had only just begun. The pass remained a scar on the landscape, a monument to the dangerous dance between discovery and destruction. And Emily, forever changed by the echoes of the missing audio, knew that some truths once uncovered could never be unheard, leaving a permanent imprint on the world and on the soul of the one brave enough to unleash them.